Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're taking a whole stack of sources. We've got geological surveys, old historical manuscripts, safety reports, and we're focusing our lens on one singular place. It's breathtaking, but it's also brutally dangerous.
Reynisfjara.
The world-famous Black Sand Beach near Vik on Iceland's South Coast. A place that sometimes gets called, pretty bluntly, Drowning Death Beach.
And it's, a perfect example of where these extreme natural forces all converge. When you actually look at the sources on Reynisfjara, you realize you're not just looking at a pretty beach.
No.
You are standing on the leftovers of violent volcanic eruptions. You're under cliffs that were sculpted by intense heat, and you're facing this completely unpredictable and potentially lethal ocean.
And there's a huge sleeping volcano just looming over your shoulder.
All right.
So our mission today is to really unpack the full context of this place. We're going to get into the science behind these sneaker waves. We'll dive into the Icelandic legends tied to those amazing rock formations, and then analyze the massive ongoing threat from that subglacial volcano nearby. This is way more than a landscape.
It's a living history book, geological and mythological.
It is. Okay, so let's start where any visit would.
Yeah.
With the black sand itself.
The color is just, it's immediate and striking, a deep, uniform black. And this isn't, the gray-brown silica sand that you find on most beaches around the world.
Right, it's usually quartz worn down over ages.
Yeah, worn down slowly. The sand at Reynisfjara is totally different. It is fresh, fine-grained fragments of volcanic ash and basaltic lava.
So is it essentially pulverized glass?
In a lot of ways, yes. When that molten lava hits the freezing Atlantic, the cooling is so rapid, so violent that it just shatters. It fragments instantly into these little, sharp, glass-like particles.
And that's a process, right? There's a name for it.
Hyaloclastite formation. And it's incredibly efficient at creating this dark, abrasive sand. It's also why the texture feels so different. If you were there, you'd feel it. It absorbs heat much more than light sand, and it feels heavier. Denser.
A direct result of fire meeting ice.
The violence of it, yeah.
And then you look up from the shore and you're hit with that iconic cliff face, Schiller Cave, with those impossibly geometric basalt columns. They look like they were carved.
But they're pure science, crystallized science. They show us the very specific cooling history of a huge, ancient lava flow.
Okay, so how does that work? How do you get hexagons out of lava?
Well, when a really thick body of lava cools, it contracts. And if that cooling happens slowly and uniformly, the forces are exerted equally, which causes the rock to crack in these incredibly precise, regular patterns.
Like mud cracking in the sun.
Exactly like that, but perfectly vertical and on a massive scale.
I noticed in the sources they draw a really sharp distinction between the lower part of the columns and the rock that's sitting on top of them. You can see the difference. What does that tell us?
Ah, that's the key insight. That's the technical detail. The really organized, straight pillars at the base. That's called the colonnade.
The colonnade there.
That layer formed slowly deep inside the lava flow, kind of sheltered from any rapid changes. But if you look above that, you see those irregular, almost messy, wonky patterns. That is the entablature.
The entablature looks almost like someone just stacked a bunch of broken plates. It's not neat at all.
Exactly right. And that chaotic cracking tells us it cooled much faster and much less uniformly. The theory is that this often happens when water, maybe from rain or a flood, got into the upper layer of the hot lava.
I see. So the cold water creates this immediate thermal stress.
Total thermal stress. And it causes the magma to crack in dozens of directions at once instead of that single organized vertical pattern you see below in the colonnade. So that messy entablature is a direct 10,000-year-old record of a flood hitting that lava flow while it was still cooling.
That is a fantastic connection. The permanent rock preserving the memory of, well, a temporary flood. Now, speaking of permanence, let's shift focus out to the sea. To those sea stacks, the Reynisfjara, they rise right out of the ocean and they just demand a mythological explanation, don't they?
Oh, absolutely. The whole idea of nature turning things to stone is central to Icelandic folklore. The common story, the one most tourists hear, is that two trolls were trying to drag a ship to shore.
But they got distracted.
Lost track of time, and were caught by the first rays of the sun at dawn, and poof, instantly petrified. Them and the boat forever.
It's a great story about the non-negotiable timing of nature.
But we found something deeper in the sources, right? An older version from an 1865 manuscript that actually gives the sea stacks their names.
This is where it gets really good. This tale is about a king's son sailing with his new bride. Their ship had to land for some repairs, and they were approached by this huge, aggressive troll woman who wanted to ride. The prince refused her.
A bad move, I'm guessing. A very bad move. The enraged troll woman just casts a curse, damning the ship and the entire crew to turn to stone right then and there.
But the prince was quick.
Very quick-witted. He instantly reflected the curse right back at her. And not just her, but also her giant male companion who was standing nearby. And that specific detail, the two targets, is what accounts for the formations you see today.
So we can actually identify them.
We can. The tall, thin stack that's furthest from the coast is Skessudranger. That means it's the troll woman's pillar.
Okay.
The one closest to the shore is Landranger. That's the giant companion. And the one a bit further out with the three distinct points that look like masts on a boat.
That's the ship.
That's the ship. Langsamor, which means the slow one, the cursed ship. It just perfectly reinforces that cultural lesson. You have to respect the landscape and its forces.
So about a land forged by fire and myth. But the most immediate, terrifying threat at Reynisfjara today is the ocean itself. This beach has, tragically earned its nickname because of these so-called sneaker waves.
The name is very apt, even if it's not scientific. These are waves that just appear suddenly, with no warning. They're way bigger than the waves that came before them, sometimes 2.5 times larger.
And they rush way up the beach.
Incredibly far inland, 100 meters or more beyond where you'd think the tide line is. You can be standing there thinking you're perfectly safe, and then suddenly you're engulfed.
So what is actually happening physically to create one wave that's so much bigger than the others? It just seems to defy logic.
It's a combination of two very specific conditions. The first thing is something called infragravity waves. These are very long period waves. They span minutes, not the few seconds you see with a normal cresting wave.
And where do they come from?
They're generated by huge distant storms way out in the North Atlantic.
Wait, so the wave that could get you at Reynisfjara didn't even start in Iceland. It's energy that's been traveling underwater for maybe thousands of miles.
Yeah. Precisely. They're these low-frequency energy pulses. If a normal wave is a quick slap, an infragravity wave is a slow, powerful shove. You often don't even see them coming in the same way. The water just seems to rise and rush. They're deceptive.
And the second part of this deadly equation is the unique underwater geography of this coastline.
That's the part that turns that energy into a catastrophe. Iceland has a very narrow continental shelf, which leads to extremely steep bathymetry, the shape of the seafloor just offshore.
So on a normal beach, the waves break and lose their power way out.
Right, the gradual slope forces them to break. But here, the water stays deep right up until it hits the land. That steep slope gives those long infragravity waves no time to dissipate.
So instead of breaking, they just surge.
They surge, like water sloshing up the side of a tilted bathtub. They hit that black sand with their full, unbroken force. And that combination is what makes Reynisfjara arguably the most dangerous beach in all of Iceland.
And the consequences are terrifyingly specific. It's not just the wave coming in, it's what happens when it pulls back out.
Absolutely. The surge can knock you over, but the backwash, the undertow, is often what kills you. Because the beach is so steep, that return current is incredibly powerful. Even a strong swimmer can't fight it. The sources say the current simply won't let you get back to shore.
And then there's a cold.
The cold is a huge factor. The water is near freezing, maybe 2 degrees Celsius, that's 36 Fahrenheit in the winter. Cold shock is immediate. You start hyperventilating, you lose motor control. Swimming becomes impossible almost instantly.
Plus, you're immediately weighted down.
Instantly. The wave is carrying a huge amount of that dense volcanic sand and gravel. Victims are weighted down and dragged out. The history is tragic with well-documented deaths, like a traveler taking photos in 2016 and another devastating loss of life more recently.
So despite this very clear danger, people flock there. What is being done to try and mitigate this threat?
Well, there are significant safety efforts. There are warning signs, electronic light systems that sort of look like traffic lights. But visitor feedback from the sources says there are challenges. Signs get destroyed by the weather, and the light system can be confusing.
Like the yellow zone, what does that even mean?
It likely signifies high caution. Increased wave activity has been detected. You should stay well back from the water. Treat it as a look, don't touch zone. But at the end of the day, the core rule, the one everyone has to remember, is simple.
Never turn your back on the ocean.
Never.
Okay, let's step back from the ocean's edge and look inland, towards Vik, because that's where we find the biggest, most existential threat of all. The subglacial volcano, Katla.
Katla really is the sleeping giant. It's the volcano that created this entire coastline, and it sits directly under the Mýrdal ice cap, which is, in places, 700 meters thick.
And it's one of Iceland's most active volcanoes.
One of the most active and most powerful. Historically, it erupts about every 50 to 100 years.
Which, when you look at the dates, is concerning.
Extremely concerning. Katla's last major eruption was in 1918. That means we're now in one of the longest periods of dormancy in its recorded history. The pressure is building.
And the danger isn't just lava or ash. It's the magma meeting all that ice.
That's what defines the threat. A subglacial eruption triggers a catastrophic event called a jökulhlaup, a glacial outburst flood. The magma melts hundreds of meters of ice, and the resulting flood isn't just water, it's a slurry of water, icebergs, rock, everything.
Just to give you a sense of the scale here, what are we talking about with a jökulhlaup?
These are monumental. The 1918 flood was so big it pushed the coastline out by 5 kilometers. Modern models suggest a future eruption could generate a flow rate comparable to the Amazon River, carrying boulders the size of cars.
Oh, wow.
Geologists are monitoring it constantly with GPS sensors and seismometers, trying to model the exact routes the floodwater would take.
So how does a small town like Vik live literally underneath a geological time bomb?
It requires a culture of absolute preparedness. They have a highly practiced emergency plan. You know that iconic red-roofed church, Víkurkirkja, that sits high on the hill?
The one you see in all the pictures?
That's the one. It's the designated evacuation center. Geological models suggest it's the only structure high enough to survive a full-scale jökulhlaup.
So the church is the ark.
It is the ark, and the plan is all about speed. Residents and the thousands of tourists there every day have to evacuate within a 15-minute window from the first alarm. Everyone knows. You hear the alarm, you go up the hill to the church.
It's just incredible. This whole drama fire, ice, trolls, death waves. You can see why it translates into pop culture. Reynisfjara's otherworldly beauty has driven this huge tourism boom, right? It's like 8.5% of Iceland's GDP now.
Oh, its cinematic appeal is undeniable. Hollywood loves it. Reynisfjara was the opening scene for the planet Lamu in Rogue One, a Star Wars story.
Right.
And its cliffs were used as the outpost of Eastwatch by the Sea in Game of Thrones. It just immediately sells the idea of a harsh, unforgiving world.
So for those of us who appreciate the beauty, but would rather avoid the sneaker waves and evacuation drills, the sources mention there are some peaceful alternatives nearby.
Yes, definitely. If you want the black sand experience without the extreme danger, the unnamed beach on the other side of Vik is a fantastic option. It has a much gentler slope, so the wave action is far less volatile.
And a totally different atmosphere, it sounds like.
Much quieter, often empty. And it's a great place for wildlife. You can see puffins nesting on the cliffs there in the summer. From May to August, you'll see horses on the beach. You get that classic Icelandic experience without the constant threat.
And I think I saw a mention of a pizzeria.
You did. The Black Crust Pizzeria. Perfect fuel after a day spent soaking up all this intense geography.
So this deep dive has covered, epochs and disciplines. We went from the violent formation of volcanic glass and the specific curses of ancient trolls through the terrifying physics of infragravity waves, right up to a modern emergency evacuation plan for a community living under a ticking clock.
And I think the key takeaway really is that to fully appreciate a place like this, you have to connect all of it. The myth, the geology, and the very real current hazards. The profound beauty of Reynisfjara is totally inseparable from its danger. There are two sides of the same coin.
And we've seen how that drama is now, packaged and marketed to a huge number of tourists visiting a site that requires constant vigilance. So it leaves you with a question. Given the unavoidable dangers, the waves, the volcano, should the focus be shifted to promoting safer alternative spots, like that other beach near Vik? Or is there just always going to be this insatiable appetite for visiting the most dramatic, most dangerous places on Earth? Safety warnings be damned.
It's a good question.
I'll leave that one for you to consider.